when emergency measures become normal operations. For years, emergency orders were treated as short-term tools, temporary deviations from normal rules designed to bridge unexpected disruptions. They were meant to expire quietly once conditions stabilized. That assumption is breaking. Across energy, infrastructure, and logistics systems, emergency measures are showing up more often and staying in place longer because baseline systems are not rebounding fast enough to make normal rules workable again. Federal transportation regulators explicitly frame emergency declarations as a mechanism that temporarily suspends certain safety rules, including hours of service, HOS, to move vital supplies during declared emergencies. In practice, these flexibilities are increasingly being renewed across multiple jurisdictions during winter fuel stress periods. For example, FMCSA's Emergency Declaration No. 2025-0112 and its extensions were used to provide regulatory relief to support the transportation of heating fuels, including propane, natural gas, and heating oil, with extensions carrying into mid-January 2026 and broader listings showing heating fuels declarations extending to mid-February 2026. This shift matters, not because emergency powers are expanding in theory, but because they are compensating for structural limits that planning frameworks did not fully account for. Emergency orders are becoming a response to predictable stress, not surprise. What is changing is not that disruptions occur, but that emergency tools are increasingly applied to recurring conditions. Constrained infrastructure, limited redundancy, tight logistics capacity, and demand spikes driven by weather volatility. The Wisconsin case illustrates the operational mechanics. Executive Order No. 284 extended the state's energy emergency to address persistent supply challenges tied to a pipeline disruption, paired with high demand for residential heating fuels. It continued waivers related to hours of service and state weight limits to support delivery, with a defined end date of February 2, 2026, or earlier if conditions abate. When emergency measures are extended because systems are still catching up, rather than because an acute event is still unfolding, the order is functioning less like a bridge and more like an operational dependency. Data shows the system pressure is real. Emergency measures are not appearing in a vacuum. Several major indicators point to why flexibility is being used as a continuity tool. Weather volatility is sharpening demand spikes. NOAA research and climate analysis continue to link polar vortex dynamics and stratospheric conditions to extreme cold outbreaks in mid-latitudes. The result is demand volatility that can stress distribution systems designed around smoother seasonal curves. Energy reliability risks intersect with fuel constraints. FERC and NERC's work following major winter events has repeatedly highlighted vulnerabilities tied to natural gas infrastructure and fuel deliverability during extreme cold, conditions where constraints can cascade through dependent systems. Infrastructure gaps persist despite investment momentum. ASE's 25 report card assigns an overall grade of C to U.S. infrastructure, an improvement but still indicative of systems that often operate with limited slack during stress periods. The combined picture is not a crisis, but a structural pattern. Volatility is rising faster than redundancy. Transportation flexibility is becoming a design assumption. Emergency orders commonly target the same operational bottlenecks: trucking capacity, delivery timing, and last-mile continuity. The logic is clear. When supply chains are strained, loosening HOS limits and certain weight restrictions can help clear backlogs and extend reach. But using emergency tools repeatedly changes how organizations plan. Over time, contingency becomes baseline, flexibility substitutes for capacity, exceptions absorb what infrastructure cannot. That creates a governance question leaders should not ignore. If your winter continuity depends on emergency relief, you are planning around an assumption that may not always hold, legally, politically, or operationally. The hidden risk is normalization without governance. Emergency tools are designed for speed, not permanence. They tend to be justified contextually, documented with a narrow purpose, and renewed under compressed timelines. When they become routine, they begin to function like standing policy without the controls normally required of permanent operational frameworks. That gap matters if organizations depend on emergency flexibilities to meet delivery commitments, manage reliability exposure, or support resilience claims. If an order becomes the mechanism that keeps fuel moving, leadership needs to treat that dependency like any other material operational assumption. Track it, test it, and plan around its limits. What leaders should be asking now? This is not an argument against emergency measures. It is an argument for recognizing their changing role. Leaders should be asking, where do we rely on emergency waivers to maintain continuity? Are those dependencies documented, time-bound, and reviewed? What happens if emergency authority is delayed, narrowed, or denied? Which investments reduce reliance on policy elasticity over the next 12 to 24 months? In 2026, resilience is increasingly judged not by whether emergency measures exist, but by whether organizations treat them as signals of structural stress or as permanent substitutes for capacity. You've been listening to Sustainability Soundbites by Environment and Energy Leader. For partnership opportunities, please reach out to our team.